Welcome back to another day of Industry Insights. My name is Varin Senthil, a junior at Troy High, and today we have our guest Anh Lai. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Can you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, my name's On. I currently, at least, I work inside the Blackstone ecosystem. So if you're not familiar with Blackstone, very large private equity. I particularly work in their real estate portfolio ecosystem. So um, as a part of that, I work for one of the portfolio companies within Blackstone, and we provide a shared service within the real estate portfolio. So roughly, give or take $500 billion in real estate portfolio, and it's a unique portfolio company where we don't create revenue, but we provide shared services to the other portfolios within the Blackstone real estate ecosystem. So particularly what I do, I'm a program manager, working on an analytics platform that provides data to Blackstone. So if you can imagine Blackstone's investment funds owning a ton of real estate and related portfolio companies, they would like to understand what's going on within their investments. But long story short, that's kind of what I'm doing.
Okay. What are the requirements that you would feel are necessary for someone who's trying to start off in your career?
Well, you're going to have to clarify, is that like right out of college or is that like high school or
I would assume like high
mid-career?
school.
Yeah, so I guess that's a hard question to answer because I'm sure your father probably went through the same journey as I did, right? So when I was in high school, it was like late 90s. Um, Tech was hot, right? It probably still is hot, right? But you have to remember, I grew up in Chicago, right? So tech was hot from the old school telecom days in the Midwest, right? So it was just hot, right? Particularly hardware engineering was hot. So you know, back in late 90s, software just wasn't as advanced in terms of toolkits and abstraction from hardware. So a lot of us in my days, we did software coming out of college, um, but we were very in tune with hardware. Like it's almost like driver level development, so to speak. Again, that was hot. Everyone jumped into it. It didn't matter if you really appreciated it or not or loved it. You just jumped into it because you knew you had a career coming out of college or high school. But I think a lot of folks tend to change their path and fully understand what they want to do throughout life after college, right? So you might go through the schooling of, let's say, software development at the lower level, closer to hardware, which is what I did. But I think eventually I realized that was not what I wanted to do, so to speak. I actually like to talk to people. Funny thing, I'm being interviewed. But it really depends on your personality, right? So you can go through high school like I did with a technical curriculum, go through college with a very technical curriculum, come out of college, make great money, great. But I think at some point early in your career, you have to ask yourself, is that really what you want to do the rest of your life, so to speak? So
Okay. Have you had multiple jobs before the one you're currently at?
I've had many jobs, yeah. So, I would say six, something like that. Many.
So out of all of them, which one was your favorite?
I think the current one's my favorite. I think definitely the current one. Maybe, yeah, I would say the current one's my favorite. Absolutely.
So has there been like a progression through all your jobs that has been like an incline of your enjoyment through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, coming right out of college, I was straight hardcore engineer, right? So I worked in telecom, aerospace, and automotive. And those were my very technical years, so to speak, very, code based. Like I'm working with cutting edge hardware, cutting edge software. Um, but as it progressed, I realized that I didn't I didn't like that path. I actually enjoyed working with people and talking with people, lots of people. And when you're kind of in the technical field, again, I can't speak to it today because I'm not in the technical field. You're very kind of like siloed off in your own world, and you're doing it's a task-based career, right? Like you are tasked with doing X, Y, Z, and that scope is fairly limited. And I realized I didn't like that. And then so I made the step to get out of that, but leverage the experience I had. And that's how I met your father in consulting. Um, IBM at the time needed somebody with a technical background in the automotive sector, which is what I had. And um, I was hired on to IBM to consult with General Motors at the time. That was, I want to say 2010, 2011, shortly after they got bailed out by the government after the 2008 financial crisis. So that was my stepping stone into just general business transformation. And that's kind of how I met your father. And from there, I continued through business transformation, the business transformation career path. That was my designated career now. And I thoroughly enjoy it because it's not actually creating things that would create revenue for companies per se, because I wouldn't be an engineer or I wouldn't be making widgets that a company would sell, right? Or services. But I would be in the transformation of a business. Like, how do I improve costs? How do I improve revenue? But I'm not actually creating revenue per se, but we're helping companies improve in ways that, whatever nuances that they need at the time. So
Okay.
yeah, that's my progression.
Okay, it's pretty great actually. I do have a question though regarding what you mentioned earlier. So when you said that people were closed off and doing like task to task, what does that mean
Mhm.
exactly? Like, could you get help from other people, or do you just like not usually do that?
Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not saying that when I was a software engineer, I couldn't work with people. I worked with many people, but it was a very particular goal, right? It's to create a widget, right? Create something that a company can sell, right? So I wouldn't be working with like, let's say, sales, or I wouldn't be working with finance. I wouldn't be working with procurement, supply chain. It was strictly within like the product development, like silo, so to speak. And it's very specific and focused, which is important for the company. It's just not something I was interested in, so to speak.
Okay. Would you say that a person that's gonna have a job like you or like your field of expertise, do you believe that
Yeah.
they should be an introvert or they should be an extrovert, or does it not really matter?
In my field, you can't be an introvert because the whole purpose of my role is to interact and collaborate with every business function within a company, right? So I'm not just working with engineers, right? Engineers are very specific and sometimes they don't even think about revenue and cost, right? So you have to kind of be an extrovert to work in at least in my case, business transformation, right? You're working across all the business functions within an organization, not just engineering, so to speak.
In high school or when you were younger, were you always an extrovert, or were there or were you in like an introvert and then turned into an extrovert?
That's a good question. I was actually an extrovert nerd, right? So what I mean is, yes, I was technical, great, math, biology, chemistry, great. I did all that, right? But I had a lot of friends, right? I had friends that were in the math club with along with myself, and then I had friends that didn't particularly gravitate to academic excellence, right? So I I, I guess the term is I lived in both worlds, right? I was able to cross that bridge socially, but maintain academic excellence. I guess that's the best way of saying it.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Another question I have is since you've done a lot of other jobs, has there been
Mhm.
like an important lesson you've learned?
Very important lesson. I think the biggest one, and especially when actually people interview me for jobs, and this is the best thing you could say, by the way, if you ever get interviewed, is to have empathy for people, your colleagues in general, especially when it comes down to like tight deadlines. There's different types of leaders that will will push the envelope on stress on their employees. Um, but the best thing I've ever done was use just have empathy. Uh, Do you know what the term empathy means? EIQ, they call it sometimes.
I'm not sure
Um,
what EIQ means. I never heard that before.
yeah, so EIQ and empathy are the same thing. So having EIQ or empathy is the ability to um, sit in another person's seat and understand their perspective. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Like, and the reason I say that is because the work I do is can be stressful on my team. Not people I manage, but the team I'm, the program I'm managing, so to speak, right? So to understand that the people that are producing results might be stressed, and they might have other things they have to commit to the organization. So having empathy is learning to collaborate with them to the point where they're producing, but not push them over the edge until they're stressed out. If that makes it, you're finding a fine line between productivity and stress, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah,
Um, Another question I had, which I'm not sure if I think you kind of answered it, but I would just like to be sure. When you were in like school, like
hmm
in college, did you always plan on going into the IT area, or like in high school, did you always plan on going into the area you're at right now?
yeah. Well, the area right now, so the answer is no, right? So, high school, college, get into tech, like get tech, start coding, whatever. Um, I like the idea more when I was in high school. And then when I got to college, the idea turned a little bit more sour for me. I didn't like it. In fact, I had more fun in economics classes than I did in tech, even though I was good at it. Don't get me wrong, I was good at it. I just didn't, by the time I graduated, I didn't enjoy it, right? And so my my enjoyment of economics eventually found its way out later in life when I started investing on the side and trading options. But I didn't fully realize in college I should have just stopped like doing the tech stuff. But I can't say it was a bad thing because of my basis and knowledge of tech in college and getting out of college and working in that area made me a lot of money investing later in life, right? Because I understood the concepts. I understood what they were trying to do. I understood like the revenue stream. And one of my good friends from high school and college have, we think similar where we hated the fact that we got into tech, but we can't hate the fact that we understand it so well that we can make money off of it investing. So it's, I would say that the answer is murky because I love it and hate it at the same time.
Okay, well that's fair. And also that's actually kind of interesting how technology or like your expertise in tech could help you with your economic side.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. I mean, the math is super simple too if you went through engineering in college, right? Like economics math, it's like child's play to an engineer. It's
That
not
is
that
true.
difficult. It's not that difficult.
Is there a common myth in your field? And if so, is it true?
Um, what kind of myth particularly? Like, there's
Like
many myths, I guess. Just trying to hold my answer for you.
Yeah, so there are like some myths that like economics don't really care about other people and they only care about money. And
Mhm.
like how house realtors don't really care about what they're selling to their clients, they just want to make money off of it and like stuff like that.
I'm not I don't think there's like I can't say there's a blanket statement where it's black and white like that. Um, my wife had an economics major and she landed in sales operations. I don't know if you know what sales operation is. You have salespeople and then you have a team that helps salespeople with data and decisions, right? And so she's in economics. She cares for her salespeople, right? Um, Salespeople, I don't know what kind of degree they have. There's probably a million of them, but she cares for people. She cares for the organization. She cares for the revenue of number one priority is revenue, obviously, but she cares for people. So I don't think it's an easy black or white answer. I think it just depends on the personality, right? So I
Yeah.
wouldn't make a blanket statement though.
Okay. Another question I have is, do you think it's like possible, like in college, someone is like majoring in physics or something? Do you think
Mhm.
they could be able to go into the IT area?
Um, so if you want me to answer in that particular scenario,
I mean,
I'll
just
put it
like
a
in
little
any
bit.
other science besides like computer science,
Um,
like chemistry, biology.
it would be tough, right? Especially like physics is more theoretical. It's math, right? It's white papers. Um, it's very academic, right? You're unlikely to end up in an executional part of a business with a physics degree. You might end up in algorithmic trading, which is very theoretical based, but you hand off your thoughts to people that will execute. If does that make sense? So
Yeah.
physics is different where you have theoretical ideas that you have on paper, but ultimately the execution is done by other people, right? Chemistry, biology, getting into tech, very low. You would, why would you want to get into it with that background? Is my question as well because I was pretty good with chemistry too. Yeah, I don't see that being very common unless you do like a double degree. But I wouldn't see you getting into tech with a chemistry or biology degree at all. That would be very difficult. You just wouldn't have the foundational knowledge, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. My final question is, what's one question that you'd wished I asked you, and how would you have answered it?
Um, I was actually thinking about this last night. I think you've actually asked all the good questions so far. Um, I think the real question is, would you do it differently? I think you should always ask that next time. Like, would you do high school and college differently? Um, and I guess the reason why people go through what they do, especially if they're like, I don't know, is your father an immigrant here?
Oh
He
yeah, he
was,
is.
right? So I was an immigrant as well. A lot of immigrants, when they come to this country, they lean towards STEM, right? Because that's like the equivalent of, like just being a doctor, right? You guys are Indian, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be a doctor because it's stable, right? And makes good money. And that was like the atmosphere in the 90s where our parents would say, get into tech or be a doctor or be a lawyer because it's stable and makes you good money. And and that's kind of the path I was pushed to follow without even thinking if I would I would even enjoy it, to be honest. So I guess the question is, would you do it different next time? And it's no blame on our parents. They were just trying to, you know, look out for us, right?
Hmm.
And they weren't as educated when they first came to the United States. They're nowhere as educated as us today, or even you, right? And you just have different perspectives, right? And so if I had different guidance when I was younger, I would have not gotten into technology. You know, I would have been in I would have had an I would have gotten an economics major because I like behavioral economics, and that's a topic that I thoroughly enjoy. The idea is, how does human behavior impact economics and the strive for revenue? But that's a topic for a different day. But yes, I would have done it differently if I had different guidance, and um, if my parents had more like a holistic understanding of business. I would have done it differently. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here today.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
great having you here, and thank you for all your insights.
Yeah, and send me the link when the podcast goes up, and I'll look out for it.
Okay. Have a great day.
Yeah, have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.